Hi, welcome to T-Minus Retirement, the podcast where we help launch your retirement into orbit. I'm Jay Cole.
And I'm Dustin Watts.
So I'm sure you've probably heard everywhere that it's important to save, and especially save for retirement.
Yeah.
Financial advisors say that. You probably hear that on talk radio. Your best friend might say that. And there is something true about that. It's always good to save for retirement because you've mentioned this many times in previous episodes, but retirement is essentially 30 or so years of unemployment.
Right. You got to fund everything yourself.
Right, exactly. And so in today's video, we wanted to talk about the importance of saving and just showing some quick calculations via different scenarios of saving, but also too the importance of just starting out as early as you can. Just because you'll see in certain scenarios, if you start out later in life saving for retirement, you might have to sacrifice quite a bit to do so.
And before we get to the examples, a couple things, we're going to be looking at how much do you need to save each month to get to $1 million. And we picked a nice round number. A lot of people, that's like a big goal of theirs is to get to $1 million. And you're going to see how beneficial it is to start at an earlier age. So if you're younger watching this, take this as your call to start now. If you're older and you're watching this and maybe you've already saved the $1 million, well, really instill it to others that they need to start as early as possible. The calculations that we're going to get into, they might be a little oversimplified. Obviously, it's hard to show all the market volatility, but we're going to be using some average annual returns that are reasonable in these examples. So we'll get into it now. All right, so our first example is we're going to look at a 20-year-old and how much they would need to invest each month to get to $1 million. Now, before we get into this a little bit, $1 million is a great goal, but one thing a 20-year-old should be thinking about is $1 million going to be enough for them in 45 years to live on? Obviously, we know the cost of living goes up. $1 million in 45 years might not be what it is today. So just keep that in mind. But we thought, $1 million is a great goal to start off with. So we're going to use a compound interest calculator to look at how much you would need to save each month. And a 20-year-old, starting with zero, earning an annual return of 10%. Now that is a S&P 500 like return for the next 45 years, would need to save only $115 at the end of every month, invest that into an S&P 500 type fund to get to just a little over 1.3 million.
1,037,000.
Yeah, 1.037 million. Excuse me. So I think one thing that's interesting, right, is your deposits, when you're saving for 45 years, your deposits are only $62,000. Almost all of it is interest. Mm-hmm. And that's something to really show people is like, look, you're not actually putting that much away, but you have, in this example, for somebody young, you have so many years to have that money invested. And that is honestly the most important part. You can go down here to the yearly breakdown, but
it's interesting to see that, let's kind of highlight year 20. Mm-hmm. So remember, these are fixed payments of $115, so you're not increasing it each year.
Right.
But even by year 20, your balance is only about $82,000. That's almost half of the 45-year time frame.
Right.
And then as we keep going down, we'll stop at year 30. That's $237,000, which is good. But still, that's nowhere near $1 million. We're actually almost $1 million shy. But you can see here, once we kind of hit the 400,000 range, that's when that compounding really takes into effect. Because we start at year 35, 391. Next year, we're shooting for about 430, and then it's not doubling, but it's just growing exponentially. And so those last 5 years, from 35 till 45, you can see you're ending the year at 391 and then now ending it at 1,037,000. So you're really going to see that growth in this case towards the end of it, but this is why it's important to just build that balance up.
It's the law of large numbers. It's like the more you get into the account, it's going to take a long time to get there. So don't, be discouraged by that. But once you get those few $100,000, now you're earning 10% on top of these bigger numbers, and it just starts to compound, and we can't express how important it is just to keep with it. And hopefully in a perfect world, you would be increasing your deposits too as you get into your career. This is a 20-year-old, so maybe 10 years, 15 years down the road, they're going to be able to contribute way more than $115. But for an example, this is a really good thing to think about: is start now, invest it, and you could be a millionaire when you're 65.
Yeah.
We're going to hop over to another example. So what happens if you're 35, right? Because this happens to a lot of people. They're in college. They're not really, maybe they're not working or they're not focused on saving, certainly. So they get a later start. They're 35. They've got nothing saved for retirement. How much would you need to save if you're a 35-year-old, each month to get to $1 million? And we did decrease the rate of return a little bit. You're not 20, you're 35. So maybe you're only going to make 9% per year. You have the allocation investment, turned down just a little bit, not much, but so you have 30 years to, contribute. It's $600 a month that you would need to contribute to get to $1 million by the time you're 65. You can see just in those 15 years of not contributing, you're having to 6x almost your contribution to get to the same result. Granted, the rate of return is slightly less, but not much. But all the other factors still apply in this example.
And you can see here too, by upping that, your deposits.
That's a good point.
You're putting in $216,000 to get that close to that same amount, whereas the first one it was only $62,000.
Yeah, that's a very good point. A lot more of your deposits are having to make up that $1 million because you don't have the time and that compounding for as many years. So good catch there, Jay. So the last one is like you're 50, maybe you had a lot of fun in your earlier life, or maybe life happens, right? And you're getting a late start, but you're getting on your feet and you're saying, hey, I'm 50, I really want to have $1 million by the time I'm 65 to retire on. I need something to fall back on, in retirement. Don't want to only live on Social Security. So how much do you need to do for that 15-year period? Now, I did adjust the interest rate, right? 7% annualized, because you're 50, you're turning that allocation down even a little bit more. But look at this, $3,250 a month. You would need to contribute to get to $1 million. That is a very, for most people, that's a large portion of, what they would be taking home. So that would be challenging to do. What, like Jay had mentioned in the last example, $585,000 of that million. So more than half is your own money, because you don't have the same amount of time to let this money grow. We could play around with rates of return and all that, but I think 7% for a 50-year-old is honestly pretty fair of what they would probably be comfortable, with the volatility in the market earning. Mm-hmm. But, these are things that you need to keep in mind when you decide you want to start putting away for retirement.
Yeah. So by just showing all this, this is kind of a shorter video than normal, but we really wanted to emphasize, well, number one, the importance of saving, and number two, just how time is going to be probably one of your biggest allies in saving into these accounts.
Yeah.
And so the earlier that you can do it, the way better ahead you're going to be without having to sacrifice too much of your monthly budget. And even in these other scenarios where you're starting out a bit later in life, there is hope. We're not saying there isn't. There's just going to have to be more sacrifice to be able to get to that point.
Consistency and as early as you can are probably your two, biggest things that we can convey that you need to, put forth if you want to get to that $1 million mark. So we hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.